Your CI build just took 14 minutes, 11 of them spent on npm install. 1,200 of those 3,400 packages came from a single dependency you never asked for. Next, JS 16 officially requires Node.js 18.17 or later. Using an older Node version may cause cryptic errors during npm install or next build. Always check your Node version with Node version before scaffolding a new project. The article mentions auditing dependencies but doesn't show the command. Run npm ls_depth equals 0 all to see the full tree, and npm ls_depth equals 0 production to see only runtime deps. This helps identify unnecessary packages. Always commit your Lockfile package lock, JSON, or yarn lock. Without it, two developers may get different dependency trees, leading to works on my machine bugs. Use npm CI in CI for reproducible installs. Let's break down getting started with Next.js 16, installation and project structure, how it works, and the exact mistake behind that failure. Next.js is a React framework that provides file-based routing, server-side rendering, static site generation, and API routes out of the box. Unlike plain React, which requires you to configure Webpack, Babel, routing, and data fetching yourself, Next.js ships with a complete build pipeline and an opinionated project structure. When you type npx create next app, you're not just scaffolding files. You're invoking a CLI that downloads the latest starter template, then runs npm install to resolve the dependency tree. The template itself is tiny, about 12 files, but the dependency tree it pulls in is massive because Next.js is a meta framework that bundles its entire toolchain. The package.json lists about 15 top-level dependencies, but each of those has its own dependencies, and those have more. The tree fans out exponentially. The real shocker, 40% of those packages are never loaded at runtime. They exist only for build time linting, type checking, or edge cases you'll never hit. Here are the commands you can run to audit your own Node modules. npm ls shows the tree, do shows disk usage, and npm explain tells you why a specific package was installed. After scaffolding, you get app public next, config, JS, tailwind, config, ts, tsconfig, JSON, and posts, config, mjs. The app directory is where you'll live. It's the app router, the file system-based routing layer. Every file inside app becomes a root, an API handler, or a layout. What beginners miss, layout. JS and page.js are not optional. Every root segment needs a page.js. Every shared UI needs a layout.js. If you delete layout.js from the root, your entire app returns 404. The file system is not a suggestion, it's the contract. This is the command to scaffold a new app with all the bells and whistles. The turbo flag replaces Webpack with TurboPack, which cuts about 400 transitive dependencies. Next.js 16 ships with two build engines, Webpack default and TurboPack opt-in via Turbo. Webpack has been the backbone of Next.js since v6, but it's old, first released in 2012. TurboPack is the Rust-based successor. It's 10x faster at cold starts and 4x faster at HMR. SWC is the Rust-based transpiler that replaced Babel in Next.js 13+. Here's how you configure Webpack in Next. Config.js. If you need custom Webpack loaders, you define a Webpack function. But note, adding a custom Webpack function opts out of TurboPack entirely. After scaffolding, you get exactly 12 files. Each one has a specific job that beginners often misunderstand. App/layout, TSX is the root layout, it wraps every page. App/page, TSX is your index root, it maps to, no config, no router setup, no browser router wrapper. This is the root layout, it's required. Without it, Next.js throws a 500 error on every root. The HTML and body tags go here, only the root layout should contain these tags. Your scaffolded package, JSON lists Next, React, React.dom, and a few devDependencies. But Next alone pulls in 80+ packages. ESLint config Next is the single biggest contributor to dependency bloat. Here's the default package, JSON. Notice that Next, React, and React.dom are production dependencies. Everything else is dev. but Next itself pulls in many more packages. If you scaffold with TypeScript, you get at types React, at types React DOM, at types Node, and TypeScript itself. These are devDependencies. They don't ship to production, but they still take up disk space and install time. TypeScript alone is 45 MB. This multi-stage Docker build ensures that devDependencies are never copied into the production stage. The first stage installs only production dependencies, with npm CI only equals production. The final stage only has what's needed to run. Package.json is the most important file in your project that you'll never read. It pins every single dependency to an exact version, including transitive dependencies. Without it, two developers running npm install on the same package, JSON could get different trees. In CI, always use npm CI instead of npm install. npm CI respects the lockfile and fails if it's out of sync. npm install ignores the lockfile and resolves fresh, which can break builds. When you run Next.js starts a development server on port 3000. It compiles your code on the fly using SWC, starts a file watcher, and sets up hot module replacement. With TurboPack, HMR is nearly instant, changes reflect in under 50 ms. Use Turbo to enable TurboPack. You can tell if it's active by the startup message. TurboPack shows a checkmark in time, Webpack shows Ready Started Server. When you run Next build Next.js compiles your app into a Next folder. This folder contains server-side rendered pages, client-side JavaScript chunks, and shared code. The build process also runs type checking. If you have TypeScript errors, the build fails. You can configure the build to skip type checking or EaseLint if you run them separately. The output, standalone option, creates a minimal folder with only the files needed to run the app, perfect for Docker. Next.js includes at nextenv to load env-local, env-development, env-production, and env files. Variables without next public prefix are only available on the server. If you try to access process.env, API key in a client component, it'll be undefined. This API route accesses server-only environment variables. They are never sent to the client. Never put secrets in Next public variables. They're visible in the browser's dev tools. The public folder maps to the root URL of your site. A file at public/logo, PNG is served at /logo, PNG. But files in public are copied as is during build. They're not optimized, not hashed, and not compressed. Use Next image for optimization instead. Use Next image to serve images from public. It generates multiple sizes, serves WebP AVIF, and lazy loads by default. The priority prop loads the image above the fold. Next config. TS is your escape hatch for image domains, redirects, headers, and Webpack config. Tailwind config. TS controls which files Tailwind scans for class names. tsconfig. JSON is partially managed by Next.js. Don't manually edit the compiler options that Next.js controls. This is a typical Next config. TS with image, remote patterns, redirects, and security headers. The image's remote patterns is required for external images in production. Your first page is app/page, TSX. It's a server component by default, meaning it runs on the server, sends only HTML to the client, and never ships JavaScript. Server components can be async. You can await a database query or a fetch call directly in the component body. This server component fetches data directly with fetch and renders it. No use effect, no loading state. The component renders on the server, the HTML is sent to the client, and the JavaScript for this component is 0 bytes. Not everything in Node modules is needed. devDependencies are only used during development and build. You can safely delete at types, ESLint, TypeScript, Prettier, Husky, and lint-staged. Use npm lsdepth equals 0 production to see what actually ships to production. These commands help you audit your dependencies. npm lsdepth equals 0 production shows only production packages. npm prune production removes devDependencies from Node modules. Before deploying, configure environment variables for production in nProduction or your hosting dashboard. Set images remote patterns in Next config JS for external images. Use output, standalone for a minimal Docker image. This config sets output. Standalone for a minimal production folder, configures remote image patterns, and skips type checking during build if you run TSC separately. This is the same issue we highlighted at the start. Here's exactly why that happened. Create Next app installs the entire toolchain, Webpack, SWC, PostCSS, EaseLint, and dozens of plugins. Each of those pulls in its own dependencies, and those pull in more. The result is a dependency tree that looks like a fractal. 40% of those packages are never loaded at runtime. They exist only for build time linting, type checking, or edge cases you'll never hit. The default Create Next app includes ESLint config next with 47 peer dependencies, and at Next Bundle Analyzer as unused dependencies, causing 1,200 of the 3,400 packages to come from ESLint config next alone. The team never audited what was installed. The fix is to audit your dependencies. Run npm ls-dep equals 0 production to see what actually ships to production. Move build-only packages to devDependencies. Run npm dedupe to collapse duplicate versions. And use Turbo to replace Webpack with TurboPack, cutting about 400 transitive dependencies. Anything prefixed with Next Public is inlined into the client bundle at build time. Anyone who reads your source code can see it. Never put secrets in Next Public variables, use server-only environment variables instead. Without images.remotePatterns, Next image will refuse to serve external images in production. The error message is clear. The requested resource isn't a valid image, but beginners often miss it because it works in development. If you delete the root layout.js, every root returns a 404. The file system is the contract, every root segment needs a page.js, and every shared UI needs a layout.js. Always keep the root layout. To debug dependency issues, use npm ls to see the tree, npm explain to find why a specific package was installed, and npm ci to ensure reproducible installs. Let's run through some common interview questions. Why does Create Next app install so many packages? It bundles the full toolchain, Webpack, SWC, PostCSS, EaseLint, etc. What is the difference between npm ci and npm install? npm ci respects the Lockfile and fails if out of sync. npm install resolves fresh. How do you prevent devDependencies from shipping to production? Use npm ci only equals production in Docker or multi-stage builds. And a few frequently asked questions. Can I delete Node modules and reinstall? Yes, but always use the Lockfile to get the same versions. Is it safe to delete at types packages? Yes, they are devDependencies and not needed at runtime. Does TurboPack support all Webpack features? No, custom Webpack loaders and some plugins are not compatible. Let's recap the key takeaways. 3,400 packages is normal for Next.js, it bundles the toolchain. 40% of packages are dev-only, audit with npm ls production. Commit your Lockfile and use npm ci in CI. Use Turbo for faster HMR and fewer deps. Ready to go deeper? Up next, pages and layouts in Next.js, file-based routing explained, then server components versus client components in Next.js 16, then data fetching in Next.js 16, server components, streaming and suspense and styling in Next.js 16, Tailwind CSS, CSS modules, and global styles. Find them all at TheCodeForge.io. Thanks for watching. The full article and code examples are covered in detail at TheCodeForge.io.